Thank you very much. Okay, so let's get the right text here. So good morning, everyone, to members, officers, and any members of the public who are viewing the live stream. This is the planning meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council. My name, and we're on the 13th of November 2024. My name is Councillor Anna Bradnam, and I'm the chair for this meeting, and my vice chair is Councillor Peter Fane. So other members of the committee, I can go round. So let's start on the left. Councillor Lisa Redruff.
Morning, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sandford.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Peter Sandford, one of the members for Caxton and Papworth Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Councillor Henry Batchelor, one of the members for Linton.
Thank you. Councillor Ariel Khan.
Councillor Ariel Khan, one of the members for Horston and Cumberton Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Martin Khan.
Councillor Martin Khan, one of the members for Histon and Impington Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Toomey Hawkins.
Morning, everyone. Toomey Hawkins, member for Caldycott Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Richard Williams, member for the Whittlesford Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Jeff Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jeff Harvey, member for Balsham Ward.
Thank you very much. Right, and so we have with us on the top table, we have go just across the board in the order that we are here. We have our case officer, Mary Collins. Yeah, good morning, Councillor. Right, good morning, Councillor. Right, so we've got Mary Collins present, and her laptop is giving us twice as much of us as you'd like. It's the microphone, isn't it? Just pause while we get the audio sorted out. We can't because it's coming through on Mary's microphone. Okay. Right. So what we're going to do is carry on from Rebecca Smith. So Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, I'm Rebecca Smith. I'm the Delivery Manager for Development Management and Compliance.
Thank you. We've got Vice Chair and myself and our Legal Officer, Vanessa Blaine. You're not signed in.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Vanessa Blaine, Senior Planning Lawyer.
Thank you very much. And we have our Democratic Services Officer, Simon Hill.
Yes, I'm Simon Hill. I'm the officer looking after this committee at the moment.
And Simon is new to the committee, so we welcome you and we look forward to working with you. And Erin is busily sorting out the IT. Erin, do we need to give you a little bit of time? We do. Okay, sorry, can I just pause for a moment then? Can we just adjourn and take 5 minutes? We're live again, members, and I think we sorted out the IT issue. Another member of the Planning Committee has joined us, Councillor Heather Williams. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I thought we'd done away with us all saying hello at the start of the meeting to save time. Has that happened again today? So Heather Williams, represent the Mordens Ward.
Thank you. Right, so those in the chamber are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you're deemed to have consented to being filmed and to the use of images and sound recordings for a webcast and archived recording. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they're addressing the committee. I'm advised that there will be a brief fire alarm test at 10:30, so we'll briefly pause at that time. For those in the chamber, please note we do not have to leave the building during these tests unless it goes on for a very long time and it is a real one. I'd also remind members that the lights carry on flashing after the oral alarm has stopped, and that's normal. So, just to clarify the process for each planning application, the process is that the case officer will give a brief introduction to the report. The committee may then ask questions of clarification of the case officer. Then registered public speakers will be invited to speak for their allotted 3 minutes. There are 3 minutes for those speaking in support and 3 minutes for those speaking against, unless I've advised otherwise. Excuse me. Public speakers are unable to join in with the councillor debate, but members may ask public speakers questions of clarification. The committee will then debate the item, and at the end of the debate and conclusion of any questions of clarification, providing there is no alternative proposal, the officer recommendation will be read out, and I will request a proposer and seconder for the recommendation. I'll ask members to vote on the officer's recommendation or any alternative proposal by show of hands. The vote of each member will be recorded. And if a member arrives after the start of an application or leaves the chamber once an application has commenced, they will not be able to take further part in that vote, either by way of entering into the debate, questions or clarification of the vote. So, item 2 is apologies. Simon, are there any apologies for absence today, please?
Yes, Chair, you have apologies from Councillor Handley, and Councillor Henry Batchelor is substituting for him.
Thank you very much. Item 3 is declarations of interest. So members, do you have any interest to declare in relation to any item of business on this agenda? Councillor Khan?
Not really a clear interest. I would like to note that I am a member for Histon and Impington and Darwin Green 2-3, which is being referred to, which has been noted, rather than voted upon, is in my ward, and I've had discussions regarding issues in that ward. Thank you very much.
That's not an item on our agenda today, though, is it? Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, as an appeal update. Yep, I'm with you. Yep, got you. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, and if any other interests appear or occur to you during the discussion, do please raise them at that time. So, we come to minutes of the previous meeting. We have 2 sets of minutes. The first is in our agenda pack dated 14th of August. Can I just take that? Do members have any issues of clarification? Thank you, Councillor Fane.
Just a quick clarification. I'm listed at the top as being the Vice Chair, but as is pointed out further down, I wasn't present, so I will not be voting on the approval of these minutes.
Okay, thank you, and we need to make sure your name is removed at the top under those present. Any other issues? Councillor Redrup?
Just that I also wasn't present at that one, so I can't confirm.
You weren't present?
I weren't present. I wasn't present for that one.
I don't think you're listed as being present for then anyway, so... No, okay, sorry.
So just can't approve.
Oh, I see, right, okay. And Councillor Sanford?
Likewise, I was not present for that meeting, so will not be voting on the minutes.
Okay. Councillor Martin, sorry, Ariel Khan?
Yes, I was also not present at that meeting, so I won't be voting on it.
Thank you. And Councillor Martin Khan?
Similarly, I wasn't
So
present
it's
at that
simply
meeting.
that you won't be voting for
No, I won't
them.
be voting on it, that's
Okay,
right.
that's fine. Councillor Jeff Harvey?
Likewise.
Okay, thank you very much. So, of the remaining people who were there on the 14th, would you like to say that they're a good record? Great. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. With that amendment of the removal of Councillor Fane from it, and then the minutes of the 9th of October have come to us under confidential cover. I just want to ask, are members happy that these are a true record of our meeting? If not, and you want to discuss anything, we'll have to look at that at the end of the meeting in confidential session. Councillor Heather Williams.
I wasn't present at that meeting, so I can't take part in that vote.
Right. Lots of people weren't.
Ditto.
Okay, right. So, of the people who were, can I just ask, are you confident that that was a true record of that meeting on the 9th of October? I believe they to be, so are we happy with that, those of us remaining?
Yes. Agreed.
Oh, together with the main minutes, sorry, that's true, that's the exempt section, but also the main minutes are on page, just bear with me, on page, starting page 9 of the agenda. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so we're happy that that's a true record of that meeting. Okay, lovely, thank you very much. I haven't got a copy to sign, so you give them to me afterwards. Lovely. Thank you very much, members. Councillor Khan?
I just note that you say in the agenda that the minutes of the meeting of 11th of September are present, but just note that they're not. Are we going to consider these at a future date?
So, yes. Sorry, Simon Hill, please do explain then services.
That's correct. When I circulated the agenda for the meeting, I expected those minutes to be present for you. Unfortunately, they're still under review by officers, and they'll come to your next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so that the minutes that are in the paper and the exempt minutes have been approved. Thank you. So that brings us on to item 5, which is Meldreth, application 24/03144, PIP, which stands for Planning in Principle, Permission in Principle, land at 10 North End, Meldreth. So this application seeks permission in principle for a residential development of 5 custom-built dwellings and an orchard on land around 10 North End, Meldreth. And the site was visited by members on the 6th of November, and an update report has also been published, members, to us in a separate supplement, if I can find it, here, on the 12th of November. Has everybody seen that supplement sheet? Good. So the recommendation is to approve, and I'll hand over to Mary Collins for your presentation. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay, so the application, as mentioned, is at 10 North End, Meldreth. The site is outside of the development framework and within the Meldreth Conservation Area. The site is also a mineral safeguarding area, as identified on the policies map for minerals resources of local and national importance. The land is also Grade 2 agricultural land, and it's situated on the eastern side of North End, to the north of and close to the junction here with the High Street and Fenny Lane. So the red line is obviously the application site, and yeah, this is other parts. So as mentioned, yeah, the application is seeking permission in principle for residential development 5 houses for custom build and the orchard. So a permission in principle is a planning application that provides an initial high-level approval for a development proposal. So it would have two stages. The first stage, which is what we're looking at the moment, is the permission in principle stage. And this establishes whether a site is suitable in principle. The second stage is the technical details, where all the detailed development proposals are then assessed. So at the moment we're looking at the permission in principle first stage, and the scope of this stage is limited to location, land use, and the amount of development. So any other issues would be at the technical stage. And as mentioned, the officers are recommending that the application is approved. So in this case, the planning authority and the planning committee are concerned only with establishing whether the proposal of 5 custom-built dwellings on the site is acceptable in principle, given the location of the site, the land use, and the amount of development involved. So firstly, with respect to the location of the site, it is located outside of the development framework, the Meldreth, and within the countryside. So, give you some pictures. So, let's go back to that one. In the countryside. So, yeah, it's very close to the High Street and Fenny Lane. Adjoining to the southern boundary of the site is a dwelling at 2 North End, and to the northern boundary you've got 12 North End, and in between, with the site wrapping around it, you've got 10 North End. So this eastern boundary of the site is tree-lined, and the other perimeters of the application site are also tree-lined. So in terms of its classification, Meldreth is a group village as defined under policy S10. These are ones that are generally in less sustainable locations and having few services and facilities, allowing only some of the basic day-to-day requirements. So the village has a school and limited development to maintain these services. But given the location of the site, it is a sustainable one where people can walk to other services in the village. So, as mentioned, the proposals for 5 dwellings on land which is outside the development framework, and the land is not considered to be brownfield. Also, it isn't for any agricultural, horticultural, forestry or outdoor recreation use or any other use that should be located in the countryside. Also, a 5-year land supply can be demonstrated. So as such, there's a principal objection to the erection of dwellings in this location, as there is no local or national policy support for the development. However, in this instance, there are material considerations to warrant a departure from the development plan. And this is what the proposal is for these 5 custom-built dwellings. So members will know that at present the council has a shortfall in the supply of self and custom-built houses compared to the demand, demonstrated by the number of people on the self-build register. There is a shortfall of 332 self-build plots as of the 30th of October 2023. So we're very soon we'll be getting the updated figure for the year since then. Within appeal decisions, inspectors have given significant weight to the provision of self and custom-built dwellings. And whilst 5 is somewhat limited in number, it would help to address the council's shortfall. So as such, officers consider that the provision of self-built dwellings, or in this case custom-built dwellings, should be given significant weight in the decision. However, this would be an unbalanced view as to whether the weight of the custom-built dwellings would outweigh any other harm that might be demonstrated in the proposal. So, whilst within the countryside, the application is located immediately adjacent to the development framework, with land immediately opposite. I'll just show this drawing actually. With land immediately opposite within the framework. So here we've got this dashed line. This is showing where the framework is. So you can see the piece of land, the question of the application site, as well as the dwelling at number 10 are outside of the framework. But you can see that it's immediately and opposite other land within the framework. So there is an established public footpath as well, which adjoins the site, and it is acknowledged that the site is within walking distance to the village centre and its services. So I won't go into full details of this, but in my report, I've just mentioned the general facilities that the village has. So it's got a few shops and a few farm shops. It's got a school. So it's got quite a few services. It's got a public house, and these are all within-ish walking distance from the site. There's public transport options with a daily bus outbound and return, sort of connecting the village to Gildon Morden and Bassingbourne, Royston and Cambridge. And it also has a railway station, and Meldriff is on the King's Cross to Cambridge line. So in this case, the proposed development is considered to be located in a sustainable location due to the proximity to the village facilities and that walkway that's connecting to the rest of the village. So in terms of the visual impact of this site, the site does provide an important gap and transition between the between existing built development. As we can see, it's a gap, but there's development to either side of it and opposite. So the site is lined to most of its perimeter, and this serves to screen the site and makes it secluded and separated from the wider countryside beyond. So this is looking into the site. So this is the rear boundary of the site. So we consider that this would screen views further of countryside beyond. So it's tree-lined to the frontage with North End, and the trees are protected by virtue of being within the conservation area. So although this piece of land, because it's well screened, there are glimpsed views really into the site and through to the countryside beyond. And so it's considered... So it's considered that there are glimpse views through the site to the countryside beyond. So here is a glimpsed view here. You've got another glimpsed view. This is through the side of the house at number 10, North End. And then you've got other glimpsed views. But generally the site is very well screened from the site. So Because there's glimpse views, the site doesn't necessarily read or is experienced as an important visual gap. So policy S7 of the local plan seeks to protect the countryside, principally from two forms of harm: the gradual encroachment of the countryside on the edges of villages and incremental growth in unsustainable locations. So although this proposal would encroach into the countryside, being outside the development framework, it's considered that owing to this secluded nature of the site, with the existing screening to the boundaries, that the proposal wouldn't necessarily result in visual harm from development expanding into the open countryside. And so it's considered it wouldn't conflict with this first purpose of the protection of the countryside, because it wouldn't comprise visual encroachment into the countryside. So I think the conclusion really is that given its location, the proposal wouldn't be considered growth in an unsustainable location, and there wouldn't be that visual encroachment. So we've considered the location of the site, which is quite a big chunk in this report. So the second thing that we need to consider is land use. So again, as mentioned before, the site is outside the development framework in the countryside, and it's has an agricultural use. The agricultural classification of the land is grade 2, which is very good. Policy NH3 of the local plan seeks to protect agricultural land, and planning permission will not be granted for development which would lead to an irreversible loss of grades 1, 2 or 3A agricultural land. One of the criteria, however, is unless there are sustainability considerations and the need for the development are sufficient to override the need to protect the agricultural value of the land. So in this instance, it's noted that although the land is classified as very good agricultural land, it has not been in cultivation for a number of years. So in this instance, the need for the development is sufficient to override the need to protect the agricultural value of the land. So the third consideration that we need to make is the amount of proposed development. So in terms of this, the site is approximately 0.72 hectares in size, and the proposal is for 5 dwelling houses. So the density is 7 dwellings per hectare. Policy H8 of the local plan states that sites in group villages should achieve a net density of 30 dwellings per hectare. So although the density is lower than recommended, it's considered that the amount of development can be provided on site, and it would accord with policy H8 given the site's village location. We have got plans that just show indicative only, but they're just showing that the site could be divided up so the plots are aligned with the street and along and deep and extended to the boundary. So these illustrative layouts show that it would be possible to construct the number of dwellings that are being applied for on site, giving them sufficient spacing to boundaries with adjacent existing properties, and also each property, there is room for each to have gardens that would meet our standards. So, so to conclude, the proposal is contrary to the development plan as it lies outside the Meldriff development framework and is for 5 dwellings. Proposal would result in the loss of agricultural land. However, the benefits of the proposal is that 5 custom-built dwellings will be constructed, and this will, and the council has a shortfall of these type of dwellings. So the 5 would add towards the shortfall. So the need for the custom-built dwellings is a material consideration which may warrant in circumstances a departure from the Cambridgeshire local plan. So in this instance, the proposed development is supported in principle, as the proposal is in a sustainable location and is not considered to result in visual encroachment into the countryside. Officers consider the provision of 5 custom-built plots tips the balance in favour of development, as it would provide a limited but valuable uplift in the identified need for custom-built plots within the district. The sustainability considerations and need for the development is sufficient to override the need to protect the agricultural land, value of the land. So that's the conclusion.
Thank you very much, Ms Collins. I have some matters of clarification for you. I'll come to questions from the members in a moment. I just wanted to ask that on paragraph 10, under the assessment, it refers to the regulations providing for granting of permission in principle on a site currently on part 1 of the Brownfield Register. But given that this is grade 2 agricultural land, I just wanted to clarify under what terms it's on the Brownfield Register.
I think with the planning in principle there is an option. There's 2 options. One is for sort of residential development, and it can be needs to be on there's certain other criteria that needs to be met, but that's one of the options. And the other one is for a piece of brownfield land to be put on the register. So the option we're looking at isn't a brownfield site option.
So does is the land currently registered on the Brownfield Register, or is this planning in principle endeavouring to put it on there?
Sorry, if I can jump in there, Chair. There are 2 ways, essentially, of getting permission in principle. One is by including the piece of land on the Brownfield Land Register, and the second is by applying for permission in principle. So land that can be included on the Brownfield Land Register or is part 1, and then there's a part 2 which relates to permission in principle. So you don't have to be on the Brownfield Land Register to apply for permission in principle. Okay. This piece of land isn't on the Brownfield Land Register.
And the other point I just wanted to clarify for members' general understanding is that, without prejudicing any decision we make today, but if this planning in principle were granted today, the technical details consent, which is itemised at the front of the application at paragraph 1.3, that could come back to planning committee to be considered if, or would it automatically come back?
It wouldn't automatically come back. It will probably, I would imagine, similar to this, that the parish council would likely request that it comes back to planning committee. At present, on the scheme of delegation, it wouldn't automatically come back, no, but there is no reason why it couldn't be called back to planning committee.
So it could be called back at that stage. Okay, members. Right, Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Question might be for the delivery manager or the case officer, but we've been invited to place some weight on the fact that there's a shortfall for custom and self-build. And on page 24, paragraph 1021, we've got a table of permissions granted. But I was a bit confused by it because it suggests there have been no self-build permissions granted since 2020. But then paragraph 1023, paragraph 1024 go on to outline planning permissions that were granted on appeal, but therefore granted within the period where this table says there was nothing. And having sat on this committee for 4 years, I know we've done numerous customer self-build permissions which we've granted. So Willingham, we granted a permission on the 16th of March 2022 for a self-build property. Bourne, we granted a permission in January this year. I know that's off the table, but we also granted a permission in Bourne on the 23rd of September 2022, and they're just two random examples I picked up by putting custom and self-build into the planning portal database. So I'm confused as to why it suggests there are no permissions when there clearly are, and therefore the 322 figure would be right or wrong.
If I can clarify, apologies, it might be that the table itself is confusing, but the if you look on page 24, the left-hand side is the assessment period, which is the base period. So the second column is the number of people added to the register within that base period. So, for example, the period that was just finished at the end of October was base period 6, 31st of the 10th, 20 to 31st of the 10th, 2021, because the third column is permission granted 3 years following the base period. So between 2020 and 2021, 189 people were added to the register. 3 years later, we assess how many, or we have to report how many permissions we granted 3 years after that period. So the period that we're about to report on the permissions granted will be from 2023 to 2024. So there's a 3-year lag between people being added to the register and then reporting how many permissions. Apologies, I thought I'd made it clear by saying 3 years following the base period, but yeah, I think there's probably a better way of displaying the information. Apologies.
Thank you for that. That helps. If I can come back just for 1 minute, Chair, though. But that means the 322 figure is not reliable because there are many more permissions that have been granted. I mean, 3 years is a heck of a long reporting period. No. So it's a lot more permissions that have been granted. So we can't really rely on that 322 figure, presumably.
If I can come back on that, it's a 1 year period, not a 3 year period. So it's the 1 year, 3 years after the base period. So the base period of people adding themselves to the register is from the 31st of October 2020 to the 30th of October 2021. And then we record the amount of permissions granted between the 31st of October 2023 to the 30th of October 2024. So we have just about to publish that year's worth of permissions granted. So if you look at the previous base period 5, between the 31st of October 2019 and the 30th of October 2020, 157 people added their names to our register. And then between the 31st of October 2022 and the 30th of October 2023, we granted 86 permissions. So it's how many people add themselves to the register in 1 year, and then 3 years later, how many permissions we grant in 1 year.
Sorry, I pushed my luck. This is the last thing I'll say. I get all of that, and thank you. That's really useful. But my worry is that we're making a decision on a planning permission now on the basis of data that's really old. So really, if we're considering whether there's a shortfall now, we need the data now, not the data as it was 3 years ago. Seems a very long time away. I think
my understanding is that the way this is worked out is not us determining how this should be worked out. It's a national register, isn't it?
Well, it's our local register, so it's how many people are added to our local register, but the requirements of the Act are the register from 3 years ago versus the permissions granted 3 years later. It's the requirements of the Act, because it takes, essentially people have 3 years to commence development. So they could put themselves on the register and then 3 years later, how many permissions we grant.
Okay. So we've got our answer on that one. Confusing as it might be, or perplexing in a way. Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the site, there are, as reported at 2.2, a number of listed buildings opposite and adjacent. We don't have any comments from the Conservation Officer. Can we assume that this is assessed not to have a significant impact on any of those listed buildings?
The impact on any of the listed buildings from the proposed development would be assessed at technical detail stage, at stage 2. So we can't assess any impact as we don't know where the built form's going to be, how high it's going to be, etc. So all of that would be assessed at the technical stage 2 stage. At this point, we're just looking at the principle of the location, land use, and the amount of development.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It's just two areas for me in actually what was said in the introduction. One of which was about bus times, and Guildham Morden was referenced, so naturally my ears pricked up a bit. Are we taking into consideration, just as to not just if there is a bus, but what that bus means? So just to give perspective, the bus between Meldreth and Guildham Morden, you've got 3 hours in Guildham Morden before you have to return, because the bus goes out at 10:20 and then the bus comes back at 1:30, and that is the only bus. So are we, just as a matter of process, are we actually not just ticking a box, it's got a bus, are we actually looking at what the bus provision is? And that might not be able to take into consideration, but it'd be good to know if that was looked at. And then also, probably more importantly, on policy NH3, protection of agricultural land, which I'm looking at, it was referenced in the introduction about the current use of that land, that it's not been cultivated and used for some time. But the policy itself does not refer to its current use, it's just whether the opportunity is there. And the first, so NH3.1, planning permission will not be granted for development, which would lead to the irreversible loss of grades 1, 2 or 3A agricultural land unless land is allocated for development in the local plan. Sustainability considerations and the need for the development are sufficient to override the need to protect the agricultural value of the land. Now, I'm not saying that one of those, A or B, wouldn't, well, A doesn't apply, but B wouldn't apply, potentially through the debate. But it worries me that we're talking about the current use, because at that point, anybody could buy agricultural land, stop farming it, and then develop it on that premise. And this policy does not refer to that current use. So I'm wondering if we can have a bit more explanation as to why that's been suggested it can be considered. It may be another policy somewhere else, but it's not clear to me why we would give that weight as to its current practice use, because if not, we could develop the whole district.
Yes, thank you. Rebecca.
Me again. If I go in reverse order, so in terms of policy NH3, officers have assessed the need for the development, so the need for the custom build housing is sufficient to override the need to protect the agricultural land value. Although it's noted that the land hasn't been cultivated for a number of years, that is just noted as in 10.49, but the officer assessment is that the need for the development, so the need for the 5 custom build plots actually overrides the need to protect the agricultural land. The fact that it hasn't been cultivated is just to note. In terms of the bus times, so that forms part of the assessment of whether or not the proposal's in a sustainable location. So the I think 10.35 outlines that public transport options that are available. It does just say that there's an out and a return. It doesn't advise, for example, that somebody could travel to work, stay 8 hours and come back again, just that there are public transport options available, including out and return. There hasn't been an assessment of the amount of time you could stay, for example, at Guildham Morden. That hasn't formed part of the assessment.
Thank you for that, and that's good for us to know, as I have the number 17 timetable in front of me. Can I also suggest then that it's made, I appreciate what you're saying about noting, but at the end of the day, we need to have what is materially can be put into consideration, and some people may have thought that the fact that it wasn't in use would be a determining factor. So if we could just take that on board for future, please.
Sure we can. Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Thank you. My question was around the lack of comment from the Conservation Officer, given it's in a conservation area, but I think that's already been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Councillor Martin Khan, matter of clarification?
The application is for custom build, and the register is for self-build and custom build. Do we consider them separately? Is the demand for custom build different from self-build? How would that materially affect the granting of this permission? As I understand it, were it to be granted, as I understand it, custom build is when a single developer builds the houses, but they adapt each to the demands of the applicant rather than being a speculative just building. Self-build is when the actual purchaser of a plot designs and builds the property, or gets another builder to build a property for him. Is that the right assumption? And how exactly would it be, how does that relate to the application in this sense?
Thank you, Chair. So the application, as you've identified, is for custom build. The requirements through the regulations are for self and custom build. Although there's a difference in definition between the two types of houses, it's one register for self and custom build. We have a requirement to provide self and custom build. It doesn't discern between the two types. Anecdotally, in South Cambs, we permit and have more applications for self-build than we do custom build, but it's one register for both. In terms of the difference, I guess self-build, you can think grand designs, where the person has an input into the design. They don't necessarily build it themselves, but they are involved in the design of the proposal. There are various different types of custom build, but an overall summary would be that custom build could be built by a developer, and that somebody has an input into the fabric of the design. So it's more than customising the kitchen or the bathroom, it's in terms of the fabric of the building. So it's not small tinkers with it, but you can pick, you know, for example, the layout, how you could want your kitchen on the first floor and your bedrooms on the ground floor, and you are involved to that element, but essentially it is off-spec, but you customise it to your requirements.
In terms of demand, I mean, in terms of the people building, is there a difference in demand for more demand for custom build or more demand for self-build in terms of or do you not have knowledge on that? I just wondered if, it seems relevant to us to know whether there is a demand, is a demand for custom build or whether there is more demand for self-build.
If I can come back on that, so our register is for self or custom, but it's one register. So the figures that are in the table are just people who have added themselves to the register for either self or custom build. They're not necessarily specifying which, so the people can go to the register for any of the types of development. I think, as I've said, anecdotally in South Cambs, we approve more self-build than we do custom build, which probably would give you an indication on the demand from the market as such.
And while we're on that matter, I just wanted to ask, given that in this case, the fact that there is a demand for self and custom build plots might be what sways the balance, as it were. So what is the functional difference between custom build and a small developer building a development of houses?
In terms of custom build, when it comes to actually, I guess the technical detail stage, there would be the occupation condition or occupation head of term included within the section 106, which requires the person who purchases it obviously to meet the requirements of the custom build, so they are involved in customising the development, and they have to remain in the property for a 3-year occupancy period, which if a small developer was just building 5 houses on the plot, then there would be no requirement for the person to be off our self-build register or our self and custom build register and to live in the property for 3 years.
And I think I'm just wondering, would any developer have an advantage in putting themselves on a custom build register to to gain advantage that way? Is there any advantage in it?
So the self and custom build register is individuals, and you have to, you're a named individual. You have to pay now to go onto the register if you were being added now. And there's various questions that you have to fill in about whether you work in our district, what ties you have, any family you have. So it's not developers who are on there. It specifically excludes developers. There are individuals who are looking for a self or custom build property in our area.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Jeff Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I've been trying to sort of form a picture in my mind of how this process, in other words, permission in principle and then submission of planning details, the kind of best way to align that with the more usual procedure, which is sort of outline permission, which I think would normally result in a full planning application, and probably mostly would result in some development happening, provided the applicant wishes to go ahead with it. So it seemed to me that
Councillor Harvey, can I just, sorry to interrupt
Yes.
you in full flow. Are you asking a question of clarification?
I am, yes.
Good.
I wanted to sort of ask, is what we're doing here sort of similar to redrawing the development framework, dotted line, if you like? In other words, that's the closest analogy you could make in terms of something that was outside is now sort of inside, in terms of, the closest match you could make between outline permission being given and this progressing to detailed technical details being submitted. Is that a reasonable comparison to make?
Rebecca, do you want to come back on that?
If I can answer on that one, no, we're not redrawing the development framework boundary, so the site will still be outside of the development framework. However, I guess the closest usual permission that, like you're referring to, is this is akin to an outline permission with all matters reserved in terms of what you would usually expect. I don't think that this committee has had a permission in principle come through it. Thanks, Jimmy. I didn't think that we had. I mean, as officers, we've had a few in the last year, but it's not a common type of application that we get, and especially within a conservation area, you wouldn't normally get an outline permission, which explains potentially why we've got a permission in principle in front of us, because in a conservation area with an outline, you'd want more details than what you've got here. But whereas with a permission in principle, it's not quite as far as going for an outline, because you're just saying the principle of custom build residential is acceptable for 5 in this location. It's the technical details is the more, I was going to say hard hitting, trying to pick my words, than reserve matters, because reserve matters is literally everything else is acceptable, or the principle's acceptable. We're just reserving some details. In this, it's literally just the location and the amount of development is acceptable, and the land use is residential. It's not quite as far going as outline, but it was certainly not moving the development framework boundary.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't really suggesting that. Was I was just trying to get a sort of comparison with the more usual process, but I think your answer is really that
closest comparison is an outline.
Yes, okay. But actually, it is a really a unique and different process, and therefore you can't really compare one with the other.
That's right. That's right. So just remember, members, we are considering today the permission in principle, first stage, and it's limited to the location, the land use, and the amount of development that's proposed, and whether that's suitable on this site. Councillor Khan, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, simply the confirmation that if it's a custom build application were to be approved and the development went ahead, the people who were residing on it would they have to be from the self-build register? Because somebody might want to come in who's not on the register and still self-build. So I just wanted to, would there be a requirement normally for that to be the person building to be on the self-build register or occupying the building?
my understanding is that given that if permission were given, it would be for a custom-built property, and it would be for somebody who is on the custom-build register.
Yes, that's correct, but that would be all handled at the technical details stage. So at the technical details stage, there would either be a condition or a Section 106, a legal agreement of some sort to tie the people, occupants, to our self-build register and to protect that occupation period for 3 years.
Thank you.
Members, so we've had questions of debate, questions of clarification of the case officer. So I'm now going to come to Mr. Biggs, Peter Biggs, who is speaking for the applicant, who is the agent for PJB Planning. And you've got 3 minutes, Mr. Biggs. I'll stop you when you reach 3 minutes, and you'll be prompted to draw a conclusion 30 seconds before your time is up. So do go ahead in your own time.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant has applied for 5 custom-build dwellings, which falls under the legal definition of self-build and custom-build house building set out in the 2015 House Building Act. Custom-build housing is a type of development that can involve a buyer working in collaboration with the developer, as has been discussed by members. This approach therefore allows for a more controlled approach to the designs of the houses across the whole of the development in this application, which is particularly important in respect of this scheme because of its location within the Meldrith Conservation Area. Prior to submitting the application made a pre-application submission to the Council for the 5 custom-built dwellings. The officer's response to the pre-application submission was that there was no objection in principle to the proposed development. It was through this pre-application submission discussion with officers that they advised that actually the custom-build approach should be applied to this scheme rather than the self-build for this project due to the location in the conservation area and I suppose the additional control that the council would have over the design of the development as a whole. The officer's pre-application response was therefore informed how the Stage 1 Permission in Principle application has been prepared and submitted for consideration by the council. It is noted that through the pre-application response, no objection was raised to the proposed development by either the planning case officer or actually the conservation officer through that pre-application discussion. But obviously, officers have clarified the considerations for this application. The Officers' Committee report for the Stage 1 application to member clearly sets out how other material considerations weigh in favour of granting permission in principle. The positive aspects of the scheme include the need for custom-built dwellings, which amounts to a current shortfall of 332 plots throughout the district, the sustainable location of the site adjoining the village within walking distance of the local shop, primary school and railway station. The proposed development will not result in visual encroachment in the countryside, and the proposed scheme includes an orchard that will be managed by a management company with access to the community. As part of the Stage 2 application, we will make sure the orchard is screened from number 10 that is beside the site, and that it will be as safe and secure and not open to the public past dusk into the evening. It is these positive attributes that tips the balance in favour of approving the application. The applicant would also highlight that they attended the parish meeting to explain the application process to present the scheme to members of the parish council. This led to the parish council supporting the application, which is confirmed in the Officers' Committee report. I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I just wanted to mention that in terms of the MPPF, that I wanted to highlight that under paragraph 70, there is support, in my view, in terms of providing small sites for self-build and custom-build development.
Mr. Biggs, your time is up.
Okay, thank you. Can I just conclude then? If there's any questions that members want to ask, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Yes, I'd like to ask, can you just describe to us where the footpath is?
I think it is shown on the layout, the indicative layout. So I suppose on that plan it would be to the north side of number 10. So just running to the left-hand side, there's an access
one of the
route that would be
officers
provided. I think it's annotated there.
Can
Zoom in.
Apologies, I can't get my laser pointer
That,
to work.
yeah,
It's
that
along
where
here,
the
if you can
cursor
see
is,
my
that
arrow.
would be the route through. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biggs. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Biggs? So Peter Sandford. Councillor Sandford. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Biggs, as you say, Meldreth Parish Council has listed support for this application, but their comments say the proposed scheme is located in a conservation area, is close to several listed buildings, and this raises important heritage issues. Have you, as the applicant, met with the Parish Council to actually understand their concerns and hopefully factor them into the design?
Yeah, we met with. Try that again. We met with the Parish Council during the application and explained from our perspective the approach to the application in terms of the principle of the matter. In terms of the conservation, that was discussed by members. They support the application. I think they were recommending that it go to the planning committee for the district, because they felt that it was obviously in their perspective, an important site and an important development, and felt that the district council planning committee needed to make the decision in their view on this type of application.
Thank you, Mr. Biggs. And they haven't chosen to attend today, so we have to just simply take what they've said in their statement and is in the report. Any other questions for Mr. Biggs? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Biggs. And you're welcome to obviously stay and listen. So, members, we are into debate. So do raise your hand if you want to make a point or make an observation or ask to see anything further on the plans. So I've got Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins, Councillor Heather Williams. Okay, right, so Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the last point about the Parish Council, I'm just having a look at the response directly from them. And the Meldreth Parish Council clerk on the 6th of September said the Parish Council Planning Committee agreed to support the application with the request for it to go to the Planning Committee because it's a heritage thing. So they do support it, which might explain why they're not here today. Because they don't see an issue with it. It's just that they wanted to make sure that the heritage issues were looked at. We are a vanguard authority in terms of self and custom build. So, yes, I think it's the first time we have seen a PIP, if I can call it that, application, to establish the principle simply because of, the point about where it is. And agricultural land. Now, in terms of where it is, outside the village framework, we tend to find a number of applications for self-build that come to us outside the village framework. That just seems to be what it is. But in this case, it is adjacent. In fact, it is like in the middle, as we saw earlier on. Which probably is why we had a question about, are we extending the village framework? Why not? It's just where it is. So as far as I'm concerned, it's that for me is acceptable in terms of the location. The other reason we're looking at, pardon me, I'm trying to find...
Land use and amount of
Thank
development.
you. Land use, yes. Each one of us, wherever it is we live now, was probably agricultural land. I mean, where I am was previously part orchard, part something else. So this will always be the case, I think, unless it's a brownfield site. In which case, as far as I'm concerned, it's land that hasn't been used for anything else in the past, however many years it is. And doing something with it now which is providing accommodation, for me is acceptable. In terms of the number of houses, I know what we saw initially was an indication. It's not that this is, it's 5 dwellings. But when you look at the indication to what is existing on the other side, the character is similar. So it's only 7 dwellings per hectare, but when you look at the character of the area, it seems to match. So on all those 3 points, for me, I find they're acceptable. The detail will come later. There is, in terms of heritage and listed buildings, while it's in the conservation area, we also saw images that show us that actually the site itself is screened. So for me, looking at it in this way, I just think I would be approving this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hawkins. And Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So looking at our scales, and I have to say that is something that is very helpful for us members. So thank you, officers, for the introduction of the scales. Am I happy to lose? And I do think it obviously breaches the agricultural land, and I maintain we look at it as what it can be used for and its potential, not about how the current occupiers are using it. However, there is that section in 1B, which is because of the tilted balance, essentially, that we are in, with not having enough self-build plots, that tilts those scales. Although they're balanced right now, we know for self and custom builds, it's a tilted balance in presumption of favour of the development. We're not in that level playing field that we are in other areas where we've got local plan. That being said, I think as a committee we've seen worse that the Planning Inspectorate has then agreed to, and I noticed the chuckle because I imagine it's the application in our fellow members' local ward, so we have to be quite practical. Is it ideal to lose that bit? No. If we had a level playing field at the moment, then decision could be different, but I think because of the balance where we're at, unfortunately, it's most likely that the most practical thing is for us to support it. And I just hope that we don't see too many more, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I can see Councillor Khan and Councillor Sandford afterwards. Councillor Khan.
I would look at the same point of view. We've had a number of appeals on self-built sites, which we've lost quite a number of appeals where it really has to be significantly encroaching and outside the development, and unsatisfactory outside the development framework for us to be able to win an appeal on that. This site is well within we're surrounded by the development framework. It's a natural part between 2 parts of development on either side. It's well screened. So in that sense, it doesn't seem to have any of it's in a group village with a station and a bus service. I'm not sure how frequently, but there was a station with regular trains. So it isn't a situation where you could have sustainable access. So it seems to me that the balance in this case is very much in favour of meeting our requirements in the self-build register where we have a shortfall. I agree with Councillor Williams in terms of the fact the use of the current use of the agricultural land or current holding situation should not really be a criterion, because otherwise you lay yourself open to further loss of agricultural land. It's grade 2 agricultural land. There's very little, I think, grade 3B and grade 4 land in this particular area, so it's likely that we're going to, any form of site is going to be on land which would meet that requirement. So, and it is obviously unfortunate to lose it, but this site is well screened. It's not obvious how it would, if it were intensely farmed, that it would be any better in terms of visual appearance from the point of view. So it's very. So I can see that a development could be put forward, which was would meet could look good in reasonable in the landscape and fit into the village. That's obviously at a later stage. So generally, I feel that that this is a site that is probably as good as we're going to get in terms of meeting our self-build register on the sort of an incremental small site in the village, and so I think I should be supporting this application.
Good. Councillor Richard Williams.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And having got my head around the Byzantine way the register works, I just want to make a few points. I basically agree with everybody else. I mean, I think, obviously take the point, we're not actually extending the village framework. We are effectively extending the village framework, but this is a site which is edged on three sides by the village framework, and there's a nice straight line if you draw it along the back. So even though there's a conflict with that policy, I wouldn't see it as as bad a conflict as we've had in other cases. So I think given the limited things that we can look at, I can't think of a reason to refuse this. Can I make one other tiny point while I'm speaking? Just in paragraph 1028, it references an appeal and it refers to it as being in Triplo. It was actually in Foulmere, just so we don't set any hairs running. It was Triplo Road, Foulmere, not in Triplo. Oh, no. Triplo and Foulmere, very different places.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. So, Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like others, I've come to a decision on this. So for me, I mean, given that we're only looking at the principal development here rather than any of the detail, I mean, the main considerations for me are the ones on the screen, but the main one being that it's outside the village framework. But after having had the quite helpful map at the start and given the linear continuation that these houses would add to the village, I mean, my concern has been eradicated in that regard. And yeah, clearly, obviously, the benefits of adding to our custom build register, which is a requirement, outweigh those considerations. I did read some of the considerations that third parties had written in to members of the public, and I think, unless I'm mistaken, the vast majority will be dealt with at the detailed stage, so not something that can be considered here today. And given the fact we have absolutely zero objections from any statutory consultees, I don't think we as a committee have any other option than to approve. So for me, it's a definite approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Batchelor. Councillor Fane.
Chair, I've got nothing to add to the comments that have already been made. I very much support. In particular, I think Councillor Timmy Hawkins said it all at the beginning. And I suggest that it's time to move to a vote on the accept the officer recommendation.
I'd like to speak first. Yes, and Councillor Sandford. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small point. We're actually looking at a phrase that says loss of agricultural land. I think we've established the agricultural land has not been used for agricultural purposes for many years, and the indicative plan actually shows an orchard, which would in fact bring unused land back into cultivation. When the technical application comes in, and if it comes before this committee, I would look very hard to ensure that that orchard is part of the detailed plans. But I think that is actually on the wrong side of the balance. It's bringing land back into cultivation.
Right, thank you, Councillor Sandford. So I would just like to make my own summary. We had a very useful site visit with Mary Collins, and that illustrated to me that all of these things evolve historically, and you will have observed from the presentation that the house immediately to the south of this, let's call it a small field, is number 2. The house in the middle that's going to be surrounded by this development, if we give permission for the planning permission, is number 10. And the house, the bungalow immediately to the north, is number 16. So somewhere along the line, obviously the post office thought something might be built here, or indeed land registry. That doesn't influence our decision, but that was why I asked the question about the brownfield site and whether maybe in the past there had been dwellings here which were then demolished when 10 was built. But anyway, My observation from that site visit is that this is a sustainable location. It would have been a nice open vista for people to see in the north part of the village, but that has been very thoroughly screened by the planting of trees, and the area itself is not an unexpected location for dwellings. So since the parish council, who know their village better than anybody, actually support the application, they have just asked us to ruminate on it through planning committee. Like others, I feel that on the grounds of the location, it's a reasonable location for housing. The land use, one can imagine that maybe in the past there was some cattle grazing on there, but I don't think it would have been used in the way that grade 2 agricultural land would normally have been used for quite a long time. It obviously hasn't been, partly because agricultural equipment gets bigger and bigger, and it would be quite a difficult parcel of land to use now because it's quite small. And the amount of development, I mean, interestingly, the applicant has put in for development of 5. He hasn't said up to 5, he said 5. He's been clear about what he wants. In my view, that's not an unreasonable quantum of development. So I'm in support of this too. So I can't hear any indication of dissent from this, but I will go to a vote in the normal way. We need a proposal for supporting from Councillor Fane, thank you very much, and a seconder from Councillor Hawkins, thank you very much. But, Rebecca, would you like to do a summary before we finally go to the vote? Sorry,
I can do. I just wanted to clarify that it's permission in principle for 5 custom-built dwellings and the orchard. So that, just to clarify, that will be on the technical details. So officer recommendation is for approval. Given that it's a permission in principle, there's no ability to add any conditions. However, there are 3 suggested informatives.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So with that then, members, we'll go to a vote by show of hands. In favour, if you put your hands up. So that is all members. Old school. Well, I'll come to that in a moment. Can we just take the count while our hands are up? Are we okay?
All members.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go to Vanessa to explain about the voting. Thank you.
So yeah, we have returned to rather old school. It has been concluded that the best way for voting at present, I raised the question, does it need to go onto the screen when all the members vote, so members, everyone can see what's going on, and it can be taken off the screen, but it can't be taken off of these little speaker boxes, microphones, and in view of that, and that's a very expensive option for the council. So currently we are moving to a hands vote that will be recorded by Democratic Services. The Constitution requires us to record the vote, it doesn't tell us how we take the vote, and it's a hand vote at present.
Object. I wish more objection to be noted, please.
I don't think we were taking a consideration of that. It was simply an observation.
When was this decided, and why?
It has been decided post-September committee, and it's been decided in conjunction with Liz Watts. But I will absolutely take your comments back.
I would require clarification. I'm sorry, in my role as portfolio holder for planning, I need to know why this was decided without any consultation.
The decision to go to a vote, as I understand it, it's what we're doing today. It's not clear to me whether that is a fixed vote. I'm not.
Chair's discretion.
I'm not convinced that it's actually solving a problem. But anyway, so I'm a bit ambivalent about it. We absolutely, Councillor Hawkins, take your view, and I think it's a matter for discussion from my point of view. I think I'd like to review the matter. Sorry, Councillor Williams.
I just think something would be worth clarifying. I'm not, raising any objection. We used to do things by raise of hand and it worked very smoothly. I think there is merit, though, in that councillors do need to decide the way in which they vote. So, Chair, if you confirm that you are happy and agreed and took that decision, I'm afraid we can't have officers telling councillors how we vote, but I completely respect if it is the Chair's decision, if that's how we vote in this meeting, then I respect that, and I think that clarification might help other members in the room, and I'm sure that it was your decision, Chair.
Yes, thank you. We can, my feeling is that it's still something for discussion. At this meeting, I've agreed to it for this meeting, and I want to review it. So, thank you.
And if it changes, Chair, could we know in advance of at the start of the meeting, rather than, I think that's possibly what's led to confusion. Well, we don't like things sprung on us as councillors.
That's fine. And obviously, we'll bring the planning portfolio officer into the matter as well. Councillor Sandford, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Williams' comments. It seems to be an arbitrary decision taken here that haven't been notified either to the members of the committee or the council in general. Is there implications for other committees? Are we going to change the way we vote on those? So, yeah.
No, true. I think it's just, at the moment, my understanding, it was just planning. But as I say, it's something I have accepted today, but I'd like to review it. Thank you. Right, let's move on. Sorry? Does somebody want a break? 5 minutes? There's no more voting, so so would people like a break? Yes, so let's come back at 25:02, please. Thank you. Okay, okay, so we're back at our planning committee. We come to agenda item 6, which is the Darwin Green 2 and 3 appeal update. And this item brings forward to members the Secretary of State's decision for the non-determination appeal for the Darwin Green 2 and 3 outline planning application, which the Joint Development Control Committee was minded to refuse in October 2023. Philippa Kelly, who is the Strategic Sites Manager for the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service, is here and taking members through her report, which has a recommendation for noting. So thank you, Philippa.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So as the Chair introduced this item, it's in respect of a site and an application that falls within the remit of the Council's Joint Development Control Committee, and this appeals update report has also been taken to the 16th of October meeting of that committee. And just to identify the application site, you'll see on the overhead slide here, the A14 to the north, Cambridge Road to the east. The application site is allocated for development in the South Cambridgeshire Local Plan, and it falls within the administrative remit of the Joint Development Control Committee. And this report advises members of the Secretary of State's decision for the non-determination appeal in respect of the Darwin Green 2-3 outline planning application. And that application was minded to refuse by the Joint Development Control Committee back in October last year. A planning appeal for the failure of the local planning authority to determine the outline planning application for 1,000 residential dwellings and associated facilities was submitted to the Planning Inspectorate by the applicant, Barrett David Wilson Homes, last summer. The appeal was subsequently recovered, which meant that the final decision would be made by the Secretary of State. And in October 2023, the JDCC resolved that if the appeal against non-determination had not been made, then planning permission would have been refused because of concerns about the supply of potable drinking water to the site. And a 12-day planning inquiry was held in January of this year, at which the case for and against the development proposals was put forward in front of a planning inspector. And the council's position was based around the supply of potable water to the site and potential harm of abstraction on groundwater bodies. Representatives from the Environment Agency also put forward their position as a Rule 6 party, that the development proposals were, in their view, unacceptable because of concerns about the ability to provide a sustainable potable water supply to the site. And after the end of the inquiry, the planning inspector sent their report to the Secretary of State for consideration. And the decision letter was issued on the 25th of September this year. The decision was issued on behalf of the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, and the Secretary of State agreed with the planning inspector's conclusions and recommendations that the planning appeal should be allowed and planning permission granted, subject to planning conditions and a Section 106 agreement. On matters relating to the issue of water resources, the Secretary of State agreed that potable water supply is a material consideration and noted that evidence does show that water abstraction is contributing to the ecological deterioration of water bodies. However, they went on to say that there was not enough evidence to fully understand the potential impact of this appeal proposals on water bodies, and in both the inspectors and the Secretary of State's views, the development proposals would not have an adverse impact on the demand for drinking water and would not cause deterioration to water bodies. And in reaching this decision, both the inspector and the Secretary of State noted that ultimately DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Fisheries and Rural Affairs, is the determining authority for the Water Resource Management Plan regime. That's a legal process under the Water Industry Act, and it's separate from the planning application determination process. The Water Resource Management Plan approval process is anticipated in the coming months and will result in an approved plan for the Cambridge Water Abstraction Area approved by DEFRA with input from the Environment Agency. And whilst noting the concerns around potable water supply, both the Secretary of State and the Planning Inspector were in agreement that this year a number of things have taken place which has given more certainty to a water resource management plan being approved. And this includes government investment in developing a water credits market to supplement the delivery of water management measures needed to meet the area's future water needs, and ongoing monitoring to help ensure that water savings do take place. And these measures sit alongside wider communications to reduce water use in the area, the establishment of a water scarcity working group to tackle water resource stress, and encouraging local authorities to work to agree tighter water efficiency standards for new development. And taken together, these measures provided the planning inspector and the Secretary of State the reassurances that mechanisms exist to ensure that the necessary supply and demand management measures in a future water resource management plan will ensure a positive supply and demand balance and avoid adverse impacts on water bodies. So this is the end of the summary of my report. It's got a recommendation to be noted by this committee, but I am, however, happy to respond to any questions which members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
So I think Secretary of State's done what the Secretary of State's done. I take it we're to consider this so that when we're looking at future applications, we ensure consistency and we know where their position is on water. However, this seems to have got into the situation because of non-determination. So, and had it been determined before some of these other things established, then the outcome could have been quite different because it's such a long period of time, circumstances have changed. Are there any other issues in relation to non-determination that we should be aware of? Is there an increase? Is it just normal? Was there a particular reason why this wasn't determined in time? Because I think when we're looking, the water situation is important. We know where we're at with that once, Bourne Airfield and the likes started carrying on. But the non-determination right now is more concerning to me.
Thank you. Yes, and absolutely. So the issue of non-determination in respect of this planning application was essentially all about the water resource issue. It was a technical issue that was very challenging to work through. Members will be aware that we'd received a number of objections on behalf of the Environment Agency in respect of some of our strategic growth sites, and we were working through those issues with the Environment Agency, but it did take a long time, and ultimately the developer was of the view that their preference was to submit the non-determination appeal to move, in their view, to a quicker determination and a quicker decision-making outcome than if we'd continued the dialogue with the Environment Agency. We've got no other applications in the system at the moment that are the subject of a non-determination appeal. Thank you.
Chair, if I could just say that's, so given it sounds like it's because there was a third party involved and that was dragging out the process, I take it there's no risk of costs?
No, there were no cost outcomes in respect of this appeal decision.
Indeed, the observation was that it was not unreasonable for the committee to have made the decision at the time it did for the reasons it did, and that was why the costs were not charged against the planning authority, because we had an objection from the Environment Agency at the time. Okay, any other questions to Ms. Kelly?
If I could just say, Chair, just to clarify, a cost claim was made against the local planning authority at the end of the planning inquiry, but due to the local authority noting the government's position in respect of the water situation, and during the dialogue, the subsequent post-inquiry dialogue, the applicant withdrew that cost claim, so that tied up that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Khan. Martin Khan.
Do we have any information about the likely speed now of progress upon further application of reserve matters and so, or is that just, or are we just waiting and hoping? Have you had any information indicated by the developer?
You mean on Darwin Green 2 and 3? That
Yes.
particular, yeah.
We will be encouraging the applicant to work with the local planning authority, to engage with the local planning authority when they are ready to do so through our planning performance pre-application process, and we will provide the advice and bring forward the schemes. What I will say is we will also be encouraging very early engagement both with members in the community, so you can expect to see through the Joint Development Control Committee pre-application briefings in respect of the forthcoming development of that site. Thank you.
Councillor Khan, briefly. Councillor Khan, you need your microphone.
Sorry, I thought it was on. In terms of the conditions applied by the inspector, are we satisfied with the conditions? I presume, for instance, the ground rules for the section 106 are already determined in the outline stage. Are we satisfied with how that's come out, or were there things which we weren't happy with?
No, we're comfortable with that. The conditions were settled and agreed by all the parties before the end of the planning inquiry. Similarly, the section 106 was settled and completed, and it had the full cooperation of all the parties, including the local planning authority. So there are no surprises in the Secretary of State's decision and the conditions that are attached to the permission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my question was around the reasoning why there was no decision made in time, hence the appeal. But I think that's been answered in response to Heather Williams. So thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about the significance of the decision, because the way I read this is that this is a slightly more significant decision than just saying because of the water credit plan, we can't, worry about water. This seems to be casting doubt on the link between abstraction and deterioration of water bodies. So am I right in essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, and I know it's not this blunt, but it almost seems like they're saying, don't worry about water, it's not your, because they accept it as a material consideration, but then they're saying, well, actually, there's no evidence to suggest that this is, a problem. So that seems like quite a significant point to me for us going forward. A follow-on question from that, which is why I slightly struggle with that idea, if I've understood that more or less correctly, is because I think you can always say about an individual planning application, yes, the link, the evidence to link this specific development to deterioration of a water body is almost always going to be lacking, but it's the cumulative effect rather than the effect of individuals. And if they're saying, well, if the evidence is not there to link this development to a deterioration of water bodies, how do we actually deal with this issue? Because we know cumulatively it will have an effect, even though we can't prove individually it will.
Isn't that what the water credit system is?
As a member of JDCC, and I think I might even have been in the chair at that time, that is exactly the point that JDCC was trying to make, that every application is normally considered on its own merits, but the matter of water is of greater consideration, and we wanted there to be, given that the Environment Agency had expressed an objection, that was why JDCC made those decisions as far as I'm aware. Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
I think this decision was made after the Brookgate one. And of course, the Brookgate one also had, it had that issue of the water. And I think it was mentioned that, the withdrawing the cost application, I think was based on the fact that the issue related to, water, which had been dealt with the Brookgate application. So it wasn't that we were being unreasonable, we were being reasonable in saying we think this will affect, the water resources, water sources later on. But I think the concern still is that this water credit system thing is not something we know, is it? It's new. How is it going to work? Where are they getting the water credits from?
I think that's a major concern. So let's come back to Philippa Kelly to maybe address that point, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this decision is material. It recognises that Potable water is a material consideration in the evaluation of planning applications, but it also importantly recognises that there's another regulatory process for the consideration of water supply and demand, and that's the water resource management process. And we anticipate that there will be a DEFRA approved water resource management plan by the end of this year. And within that document, the approved plan will embed supply, demand and mitigation measures through, for example, water management mechanisms. So it feels like almost we're in a sort of an interim period until we've received that confirmation of the DEFRA adopted plan. The other measures that you've mentioned, the package of measures like the credit system, I note concerns, and certainly JDCC members raised last month concerns about understanding what that might look like and how it will be embedded into the process. What I can say is that I can take these concerns and report them back through the Director of Planning to the next meeting of the Water Scarcity Group. We don't convene that group. That group's not within our remit of responsible areas, but we can feed back into that any concerns that have been made. And also to note that there's recognition that earlier this year, the Water Scarcity Ministerial Statement also noted that local planning authorities should be encouraged to do all they can to seek greater water efficiency measures through their planning decision making, and certainly we are looking to do that, and developers are certainly working with us to go beyond the adopted local plan requirements. So it's one of a package of things that that's within our control and remit to do.
So we as planning committee, certainly as planning committees, we can, we recognise what's in our guidance, but we can ask developers to meet more exacting standards, because this is important. Right. Sorry, I have a list here. Councillor Fain and then Councillor Khan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of us find it a little confusing that the inspector said that this proposal would add pressure on existing water bodies, need to add to pressure on ecology of surface water bodies. However, she also went on to say the development would not have an adverse impact on demand for potable water use and associated abstraction. But that is her finding. I think what matters to us is the advice which we're given as to the weight we give to this in relation to future applications, future decision making. And that's clearly set out at 3.33. This decision is material consideration of future planning decision making. At least until such time as the Water Resource Management Plan, which we're told is, as was mentioned just now, likely to be the end of this year. And Council's opinion was that the received advice is that the weight to be given, more particularly to the joint statement of 7th of March, should change with the passage of time and should be kept under review. So I think this is a matter we may need to come back to, well, let's say when the Water Resource Management Plan is published, or possibly at some stage next year if it hasn't been. Is that reasonable interpretation?
Yes, absolutely. So your planning officers will be keeping a close eye on the situation. We will be reviewing the position, either when the Water Resource Management Plan is approved at the end of this year, or if it hasn't been, early in the new year. And certainly we will be feeding back any update in respect of our views with regard to the position in respect of potable water when we report back to committee any applications which do raise potable water issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Kelly. And did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, briefly. It links rather to what Councillor Fain has been saying. This will give permission for the overall development, but that's going to take place over many years. In the light of the Water Management Plan and future experience of the water credit system, will there be scope for affecting the phasing and delivery rate? For instance, if it's found it was more of a problem in 5 years' time, so that it meets the requirements of the delivery of the water, of the proposals in the water management plan.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes, there were water efficiency conditions embedded within the decision notice. I don't have them close to me, but certainly as part of any further updates in respect to those proposals coming forward, we would certainly anticipate briefing members in respect of the water efficiency position, so you're fully informed as to, you know, what that might look like as the scheme comes forward for development over time.
Thank you. Righto. And Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Chair. Is the Environment Agency independent from this process, in that, you know, in future applications, if they aren't convinced by whatever's in the Water Resources Management Plan or the water efficiency measures that are being brought forward, can they, and would you expect them to be lodging objections in the future, even though their objectives haven't succeeded in these two cases that have come forward?
They are a consultee to such developments, so they are entitled to make their comment as a stakeholder.
Yes, thank you. If I can also add that they are independent. They are also closely involved with the drafting and agreement of the Water Resource Management Plan as well. So one would hope and expect the Environment Agency to sign off any final Water Resource Management Plan before it goes to DEFRA for formal approval. But ultimately, yes, they can independently put forward their position and their views on any planning application, as we've seen for this particular one, and also attend public inquiries and take part in that process as they did through being what we call Rule 6 status. But I think, you know, to offer reassurance, the expectation would be that they would have had sight and been closely involved in the drafting of the Water Resource Management Plan before it is sent to DEFRA for sign-off. Thank you.
Right, members. I think we've...
Martin wants to come back.
Martin.
A very brief comment. I would just comment that it noted that the claim for costs is still outstanding against the Environment Agency, as I understand it. And
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Councillor Khan.
Is that correct? That is correct.
No, it's not. The claim for costs against the Environment Agency didn't succeed with the Secretary of State making the position that taken the view that they hadn't acted unreasonably at the time of the public inquiry in respect of this planning application.
I'm glad about that. I was concerned that if they had to pay costs, this might be a discouragement about them objecting in future applications. So thank you very much. It's useful.
So thank you very much indeed, Ms. Kelly, and I'm sure we'll come back to you for further clarification in due course as it comes forward. So we are required to just note that report, and I think we've discussed it and noted. Thank you. So item 7 is appeals against planning decisions and enforcement action. And does anybody want to ask any questions on that? Many of these are ones that we have seen before and have been briefed on before. Okay, right, so with that, yep, oh, sorry, Rebecca. Yep.
Sorry, I was just going to give an update on the Appendix 3A, which is local inquiry dates scheduled. It notes 2 applications, a full planning application and a certificate of lawfulness application at land to the south of Sheer Fen Boat Club. There's also a 3rd enforcement notice tied up together with that inquiry, and the event dates have changed. So at the time of publishing the agenda, event date was due to start on the 11th of February. However, those dates have changed in the last 24 hours, and the appeal is due to start on the 1st of April and run for 7 days up until not 7 consecutive days, but 7 days up till the 10th of April.
Okay, and bang on time, we've got the enforcement team with us. Now that they're here, people might now want to ask a question. So, Okay. Right, so members, I think the next, just note that the date of the next meeting is held on Wednesday, the 11th of December. And we're reminded that immediately following the close of this meeting, that there'll be a short member session on compliance, which we requested. So thank you very much for coming in. Okay, members, I'll close the meeting at 12 o'clock, so 12:01. Thank you.